Aurora, Texas. A small community north of Fort Worth may be named for the glimmering light show seen in the sky, but it's something that fell from the wild blue yonder that's legendary in this town.
Well, you guys have interesting history here.
We do have at that, yes.
Dan McIntyre is the town's historic preservation officer. An interesting title for a place that's only got about 1,200 people, but it used to be much bigger.
It used to have a population, I understand, over 5,000 here, and there was some problems. They had an epidemic they went through and kind of wiped a lot of the population out. Also, the railroad bypassed the town. There's a pamphlet out called The Town That Almost Was.
During the continuous downtrodden times of the late 1800s, something out of this world is said to have happened here.
Well, there's a rumor about the spaceship that hit one of the windmills.
File this one under strange and unusual, because this story is just getting started.
As I understand it, the spaceship hits Judge Proctor's windmill out there and crashes. They took the alien's body and they buried him at the cemetery and gave him a Christian burial. Several of the people in the area, they went out and looked at the crash scene. I understand they threw parts of the spacecraft down in the well. Other people just took, and carried off what they could of it, which people would do, I would suspect.
The alleged crash even made the Dallas Morning News on April 19, 1897. Submitted to the paper by Aurora resident S.E. Hayden, a local cotton buyer, the alien news wasn't front page by any means, but it did make page 5. While skepticism was high back in the day, some still believe that something happened here. All you have to do is go to the cemetery, where the alien is said to have been buried.
Well, I'm sure you guys get some interesting characters visiting town.
Of course.
You think it's an alien over there, Mary? Yeah.
A large stone serves as the marker to the foreign body that has apparently been moved to keep curious kleptos from digging up whatever could be resting in the Aurora cemetery.
And this is my understanding, that he was moved and buried elsewhere so that, people couldn't go around digging him up. And it would make sense to a degree. The people that did that are all dead. I don't know if they passed it on to anybody else, but I'm not aware of anybody that knows actually the actual burial site. But, again, that going back to that good old Texas law, you got to get permission of his next of kin to dig him up anyway, so who knows?
Unless you're the people redigging him somewhere.
Unless you're the people that's going to move him.
Despite being a far-out story with no real physical proof, people still stop by to pay their respects to Ned, the resident out-of-this-world alien corpse that may or may not be buried here.
Hello?
You came all this way, you're out in the middle of nowhere, you gotta at least venture another 50 yards to see the alien.
Ricky Lee and family happened to be saying goodbye to a lost loved one from this Earth when they decided to see what the cosmic commotion was all about.
Yeah, I think there's an alien down there.
It's just part of our background to come up here, and when we have a funeral, a family funeral, we come and pay our respects to the alien also, so.
How fun is it to show up at a cemetery after someone just gets out of a funeral and have them over here laughing and smiling not even 5 minutes after that?
I thought it was very interesting, and it lent a lot. I think they enjoyed it a lot. I think it probably lessened their pain. That's what I've seen anyway. And for me, I thought it was nice. Very few funerals can say that.
So the story of an alien ship that crashed in the windmill of one Judge Proctor lives on. Perhaps for light years. But it does bring a smile to some when they need it most. And keeps that tingling question of, are we alone, hovering in our heads.
I like to think there's other life out there. I not so sure the people of Aurora back in the 1800s were so sure about what they saw, but I'd like to think it's true. It'd be awesome.
It's the essence of the question, are we alone out there?
We're not alone. We know that. You know, we know we're not alone, but what's there, who's there, that's the question. That's the big question right there, isn't it?
It's just because it's a good story, a good old hometown story. So, it's good to come follow a trail.
I am a strong believer in the dear Lord is powerful enough that if He wanted to create another universe and other people, He could have done it. He didn't have to tell us about it. Now, that's what I believe strongly.
Do I believe? Might as well. All for the fun of it.
There's going to be a point in time when you guys are digging a grave and you're going to come across an unmarked grave. Do you venture opening it?
I don't expect to open anything.
I'm gonna have to ask you to look right here. Your car's parked over there. Good luck.
What are we doing here, Matt? What are we doing here?
Your total today is $1.62.
For a story like this,
Tater Junction, local cafe.
a place called Tater Junction is as good a place to start as any.
Hey, order up.
It's where Frankie Shorty Miller gets his coffee.
Almost every day. It's in my office most of the time.
Where his cup of joe comes with a dirty joke or two.
Oh, I ain't gonna tell no dirty ones on TV.
I really believe it happened.
Maybe a tall tale or two along the way.
I've heard 10 different stories. I've heard about the Martian that crashed up here on Aurora Hill and what they did with the bodies and all this stuff.
Because this is Aurora, Texas, 40 minutes north of Fort Worth, where in 1897 the Dallas Morning News wrote about a terrific explosion, a flying saucer colliding with a windmill and a badly disfigured pilot they found who was not an inhabitant of this world. Which explains the historic marker bearing that story at the old Aurora cemetery and why amid the gravestones of Aurora's founding fathers and mothers,
there's still a huge divide between the believers and the non-believers.
You can find the city administrator sitting on a rock.
I had ordered the placement of this rock here because people wanted to know where he was.
He is the UFO pilot, the one they've since named Ned, the one who early Aurora settlers supposedly offered a good Christian burial on this spot underneath a gnarled tree. Protected by a hive of bees where visitors now use markers to claim the rock and the spot where his earthly resting place supposedly came to be.
I think it's a fun story. I'm, not entirely sure it happened.
But after a short walk,
this has been one of the biggest cover-ups ever,
to Aurora's tiny city hall,
this is the smoking gun.
A believer and a Ned mannequin are awfully easy to find.
Yeah, I think it happened.
Jim Mars is an author, conspiracy theorist, and newspaper reporter who covered this story decades ago when he and a friend
we found readings,
found evidence of metal fragments at the grave, but then the next day they were gone. And someone took Ned's original headstone, too.
He said, I think it was the government. And I said, I think you're right. I think they've been aware of what really happened at Aurora and have been keeping tabs on it.
But keeping tabs on the story from his outpost at Tater Junction, Frankie Miller had a suggestion.
Oh, yeah.
Find the UFO and the shattered metal pieces the locals decided
that would have been a hard one to get around.
To bury in a farmer's well.
He might be in that old well up there if you can find that old well.
So, we found it.
It's been a story forever.
It's Jackie Stone's well. Is this the old well, this hole here?
This is it right here.
His granddad's well. He always told him the story.
It's the best story you'll ever hear.
Even told him these are the trees near the old windmill where Ned and his disintegrating flying saucer met their fate.
That one right there seems like it's never got any bigger.
Yeah. Well, spaceship will do that to
it. There you go. It's a damn good story and it's not going away.
Whatever happened here 120 years ago, or at least the story that started here 120 years ago, helped put Aurora, Texas on the map. But now, as they re-embrace the legend of Ned, these 120 years later, they're hoping their spot on the map can finally get a little bit bigger.
They're building a stainless steel monument, complete with a windmill at the entrance to town. The UFO is the Aurora City logo. They're even putting it on coffee cups, hoping Ned, 120 years later,
this has been in plans for about 3 years,
can bring a few more tourist dollars to town.
She believes.
Tips a Tater Junction waitress would be happy to see it.
We have to have one claim to fame. Everybody does. I want to believe it. I really do.
So at this point, you're asking yourself, why not just dig up the alien grave and see if Ned is still inside?
Let the alien lie where he may.
Because the city administrator says they can't.
There's a law in the state of Texas that says you have to notify the next of kin before you exhume remains. And obviously, we do not know any other Neds.
So whether they ever dig or not, the legend lives 120 years and counting.
Believer is not really quite exact. I believe in a God. I know there are UFOs.
There's a good possibility, real good possibility.
A real good possibility, at least, that the legend of Ned...
Have you seen where the alien's buried?
...will likely outlive us all. In Aurora, Texas, Kevin Reese, Channel 8 News.